But there's 1,200 Army people with their wives, spouses, kids that are coming down to set up a regiment which has been, the Commonwealth has spent nearly the best part of 900 million at Edinburgh establishing the greatest and latest Army barracks and training facilities in Australia. So that will make Edinburgh in itself, with the RAF presence there, with the Orion aircraft and the future surveillance aircraft and the unmanned aerial vehicles that are going there, one of 2 super bases in Australia. So with that comes all the peripheral work and opportunities and support enterprises that are needed.
So the people that are coming specifically to the battalion or the regiment that's arriving, how many of them are being housed in the Edinburgh precinct, which is purpose-built, presumably?
Yes.
And how many will be available for the general community to buy their houses and, if you like, soak up a bit of, or consume stocks of private housing?
A bit of a mixed answer here, but it's all positive for the real estate industry. And for the ladies of the northern suburbs, there's 700 single men, young men, that will be
We've got
some
staff they'll want to hear about this.
that are coming as part of the regiment. But there's about 360 families and 480 kids. So Defence Housing has already secured 370 houses, I think, through the scheme of purchasing from both the private sector and commissioning houses to be built. There, as I understand it, there's accommodation for about 200 singles on barracks, but the rest will be looking for accommodation in the communities. And the old perceptions of young Army men in particular, not having a lot of discretionary spend is gone. These people, when they tour offshore, Afghanistan, Iraq or Solomons or wherever they've been, they get $50,000 cash, tax-free, on top of their salary. They've got very, very healthy home loan scheme through Defence, something that you and I would be most jealous of. So we're talking about serious commitment, whether it be to live in or to invest. So we won't just see this money flow in to the area around Edinburgh. These people will be looking, I imagine, from Mawson Lakes, Inner Harbour, Port Adelaide, right through to Golden Grove. Quite a big range of property that they'd be looking at.
Now, the scheme that's been advertised and promoted quite heavily with regard to investors buying properties and then leasing them to the Defence, are you involved with that, or is that
No, that's a federal government scheme run by Defence Housing Authority.
Right.
And fundamentally, they've got very serious rules about the quality of housing, number of bathrooms, quality of bedrooms, air conditioning, undercover garaging, and a whole range of rules that I'm no expert on. But they tend to create the asset and then lease them out to sell them and lease them back to the public.
Right, so it's a lease back on the
work they've done, using the private sector to do that work.
Right,
initially.
okay. So in terms of absorption of stock that's currently in that, particularly the northern area, just as a guess, how many homes, so people who are watching this have got their private home, how many of those people will be taken out and sell their houses or rent their houses? Well, let's say sell. Just have a guess. I know, just an intuitive guess.
You're taking me way outside my capability area here, but I'd rather not be specific on number. But what I'd say to people is that we're talking about some very cashed up, wise people that, if they don't buy to live, will buy to invest.
Invest, right.
And the other part of our state strategy, which I think is fundamental to the whole thing, it's easy just to look at the regiment coming down, but what we've looked at is the statistics, and the average stay in the Defence Forces for the participant and their family is about 8 years. So they rotate in 3-year blocks. If we can capture them in the second block, and their families become established here, integrated into the community, etc., they're more than likely, because South Australia offers so many advantages in terms of cost of housing, less traffic, access to schooling,
lifestyle,
it's just lifestyle, the whole thing, food, everything. There's no comparison anywhere in Australia. So we believe that we'll capture the family, and that the enlisted partner will go off and do their last 3 years and come back.
Right.
So
Okay.
not only will we have the family here, but we'll have a return of skilled expertise to the state for the longer term.
So, Andrew, there's been a lot of discussion. I'm not sure whether it was you that was talking about this or whomever, but I just want to clarify, was it a strategic decision by the federal government or whoever the governing body is to relocate this battalion or this regiment to South Australia for the purposes of retention of staff?
It was certainly one of the elements that persuaded the federal government or Defence. South Australia, under the Economic Development Board's recommendations, lobbied hard with Canberra, but in some ways, in retrospect's always a nice thing to have, and we now have the ex-Chief of Army, Peter Lay, on our advisory board, so I'm privy to what was going on in his mind back then, which I wasn't at the time. It was a bit of a no-brainer for them because of the things you talk about. The problems of the soldiers in Darwin, for example, is that their spouses can't get the employment they need in Darwin. It's very limited.
Yeah.
And often the spouses are earning as much, if not more, than the soldier.
Right.
The kids can't get the education that they dream of in terms of parents looking south.
Mm.
And the housing in Darwin is extremely expensive, as you would know better than me.
Disproportionately. But
Absolutely.
But if they're moving from there to here, that will get back to market forces. So I imagine that will level out a bit.
Well, I have a Machiavellian plan that maybe I shouldn't reveal on TV, but
Oh, this is the spot to reveal anything, Andrew.
we think that the 5th, 7th, the 5th Royal Australian Regiment still stays in Darwin. 1st Brigade is the overall brigade that controls both of these mechanised battalions, and they have some helicopters and guns and other things.
All the interesting stuff.
Yeah, a lot of that will be down here too. But we think that overall, with time, it will become, and word of mouth from the soldiers and their families that are down here, it will become a no-brainer
A preferred destination.
for the whole of 1st Brigade to be down here, which would be 3,000 soldiers instead of 1,200, and all the support groups that come with them. And then we use the Alice Springs Darwin Railway to transport them
All the heavy
back and
stuff up and
forth
down, yep.
for training in the off-wet season, because at the moment they can't train in the wet
Right.
up there. Whereas they train extensively at Cooltana between Port Augusta and Whyalla here.
Okay.
So we've laid the pieces of bait. We're just time will tell.
It's just if it attracts them.
Yeah.
I personally think it'll be successful because I've travelled a lot as you have,
Yeah.
and this is not a bad place to live, is it?
I haven't found anything better yet.
It's a damn good
and
place
I
to
know
live.
you haven't.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about specifically some land holding, 500 hectares, northern Lefevre Peninsula. What's the latest on that?
Okay. When I was first asked to look at doing the Techport development, a very wise chairman of the time named Robert Champion de Crepney and I discussed things, and we thought securing land, all the government land down there was critical, because what we couldn't do is recommend to the government they invest 300 million plus taxpayers' dollars and have someone pop up next door and compete. So we went to the government departments. We had 35 hectares, I think, originally, and I expected to maybe double that. And when we tipped all the land out owned by different departments, there was 500 hectares.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Oh, I couldn't believe it.
That's a serious amount of land.
No individual government department knew. So it was seriously
Bit of a wake-up
exciting.
call. Yeah.
What we've done since is land on the the Lefevre Peninsula, my apologies, is about 350 hectares. That's all controlled by us now. And there's still some land on Garden Island and Torrens Island and that's owned another 150 hectares that's owned by Treasury.